So you want to learn to crochet but you're not sure where to start, or maybe you've tried crochet in the past and you just couldn't get it right, or maybe you've tried another tutorial that went a little bit too fast for you. Well, don't worry, because I've got you. In this video I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to get started with crochet. I'm going to go quite slowly and zoom in so you can see exactly how those stitches are made. By the end of this video you will be able to crochet. In this video I'll be covering what supplies you need to get started, how to hold your yarn and hook, how to get the first loop of yarn on your hook with something called a slipknot, how to make a chain stitch, how to make the two most common crochet stitches, single crochet and double crochet, and how to finish off your crochet properly. I'll also recommend some tutorials to move on to next that are great first projects for any beginner. You can use any yarn you like for this tutorial. However, I do have some recommendations for beginners. I recommend finding something that is plain and smooth, so it's not fluffy or sparkly, it's just sort of plain yarn. I also recommend going for something that isn't really thin or really thick. As a guide, ignore what the label says on the front. You can learn all those complicated terms for different types of yarn later. Instead, turn your yarn over, and on the back of the label somewhere it will tell you what size crochet hook you need for that yarn. So for this yarn I need a 4mm hook, or if you're in the USA that's a G-sized crochet hook. I recommend choosing a yarn that has a recommended hook size of anything from 4 to 6mm. Thinner than that and you run the risk of not being able to see your stitches clearly. Thicker than that and it gets quite clunky to learn those crochet stitches. I'm going to be using this yarn for this tutorial purely because I like the colour and the feel of it. On the back of the label it tells me I need a 4mm crochet hook, but not all crochet hooks are made the same, so I do have some crochet hook recommendations as well. I recommend these sort of crochet hooks for a beginner. It doesn't matter on the brand, they are aluminium coloured crochet hooks. They're cheap and widely available. However, if you would like a brand recommendation, I actually prefer to crochet with these two sorts of hooks here. So this hook here is a Clover Soft Touch and this is a Clover Amour hook. I find these hooks offer a smooth crochet experience and you'll find it a lot easier to crochet if you invest in your crochet hook. These run about £3 to £4 in the UK and I think these run about £7 now. You're also going to need any pair of scissors. It doesn't need to be a fancy embroidery pair of scissors like this, you can just use your kitchen scissors. And you are definitely going to need some sort of large needle. Most people would recommend something labelled as a yarn or a tapestry needle. These have a big eye for your yarn and a blunt tip. However, I find that these don't do as good job as sharp needles. So these sorts of needles are usually labelled as darning needles and they have a sharp tip which helps you secure your tail end in, and I am going to cover that in this tutorial. There are countless ways to hold your yarn and hook and to crochet. None of them are right or wrong. You need to do whatever feels comfortable and natural to you. There are two most common ways of holding a crochet hook. Like a knife. Notice how my grip is loose here. I'm not tightly gripping the knife, it's just resting on my fingers. Other than the knife hold, the other way of holding a crochet hook is like a pencil. Do whichever of these feels most comfortable and natural for you. I prefer the knife hold. Now pull up the end of your yarn and I'll show you how I like to hold my yarn. Again, there is no right or wrong here. If this doesn't feel comfortable for you, feel free to hold your yarn in whatever way you like. So I'm going to hold the yarn here with my ring and my little finger. And I'm just going to hold those over. These are not gripping tight, but they're also not loose and baggy like this. I've just got enough tension that when I pull on the yarn I can feel a very slight drag from those fingers. If you find that holding your yarn like this with these two fingers causes you pain, I would recommend instead wrapping the yarn tail around your ring finger and controlling the drag of the yarn with that little finger held up next to the ring finger like this, as this means you can have your fingers like this and you can still control your tension. However, that can be a little bit complicated for beginners, so feel free just to grip it with your ring and little finger. Then take the yarn tail, loop it up over the top of your first finger like this. Then pinch the yarn with your thumb and your middle finger. So I'll just give you a little look all the way around of how I'm holding this yarn here. So this yarn here is called your working yarn, and this is the space where we're going to form the stitches. This yarn should not be super tight like this, but it also shouldn't be loose and baggy like this. You need to find that Goldilocks zone where the yarn is just got a little bit of tension in it so that we can form those stitches. And as we crochet, we let the yarn travel up over this finger and through these two fingers here to form the stitches, just like this. Can you see how it's running through my fingers? So again, we hold our yarn with our ring and our little finger up over the top of the first, pinch it with the thumb and the middle finger. Then I'm going to hold my hook like a knife and we're ready to start crocheting. To start crocheting, we need to put a loop of yarn on our hook, and we use something called a slipknot to do this. If you've watched other tutorials, you may not be familiar with the method I'm going to show you, but I think it is the quickest, the easiest and the neatest looking. So you need to put your hook to one side of the working yarn and pull out. Then rotate your hook 360 degrees, making this twist here. That is what we're going to use instead of a slip knot. You should have quite a long tail dangling here below your twist. This tail needs to be long because we need to secure it later. It needs to ideally be at least 6 inches. So I'll show you this slip knot twist again. I'm just going to take that hook off the yarn. So take your hook, put it to one side of the working yarn, pull out, rotate 360 degrees, making this twist. Now pinch that twist with your thumb and middle finger. We're now ready to learn chain stitch. Chains are the first thing that any beginner learns because we use it as the foundation for our crochet. To make a chain, we need to first learn what a yarn over is. So a yarn over is where we take our crochet hook, we put it behind our working yarn like that. I'll show you it again. So I'm taking my crochet hook and I'm moving the crochet hook behind the yarn like that. That is a yarn over. You do not want to be going behind the yarn from the top. That is called a yarn under. That will twist your stitches. You must go from bottom to top like this. So now we've done a yarn over. To make a chain stitch, pull your hook down until you catch that thread. Then turn your hook down to point it towards your thumb. So I'll show you that again. So I'm doing a yarn over and I'm pulling my hook down and twisting it. Can you see that there? Now we're going to use the hook to pull that wrap of yarn, that yarn over, through that loop on our hook. Well done, you just made your first chain stitch. If you struggled there to get your hook through, you're probably holding too much tension here on the yarn. So loosen this up again and try again. So yarn over, pull the hook down, rotate it slightly and pull it through the loop. Yarn over, pull the hook down whilst rotating it slightly and pull it through the loop on your hook. So this is our chain starting to form here. I'll show you what this looks like and how we count this later. But for now, what I want you to do is keep practicing that chain. You might have some problems with your tension. You might either be holding your yarn too tightly so that your chains are really tight and it's hard to get your hook through, or you might be doing them too loosely like this and they end up baggy. Tension is one of the most difficult things to learn in crochet, so it takes a lot of practice. So to practice maintaining our tension, I recommend making a chain for as long as it takes for you to feel comfortable holding your yarn, holding your hook, making the stitch and maintaining your tension. When I first learnt to crochet, my first chain was hundreds of stitches long, just so that I could practice that tension. So I'll show you again how to continue making a chain. Yarn over, pull your hook down and rotate it ever so slightly and pull it through the loop on your hook. Yarn over, pull through. 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 So continue making your chain for as long as it needs to be until you feel comfortable making those stitches. When you're finished with making your very, very long chain, take the yarn off of your hand and take the hook out of that loop. If you pull on that yarn now, that chain will undo itself because that practice chain has now served its purpose of teaching you how to make the most basic crochet stitch. So for the purposes of this tutorial, you can make a chain for however long you like to learn single and double crochet. I'm going to recommend a chain of 10. So I'm going to put my hook to one side of my working yarn and pull out, rotate it 360 degrees to make that slip knot, pinch it between my thumb and middle finger. I'm then going to make a chain for a count of 10, so I'm yarning over and pulling through. So there is 1 chain, 2 chains, 3 chains, 4 chains, 5 chains, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's have a little look at this chain so we can see where our chain stitches are. So if you have a look at this chain here, we've got some V shapes formed from the yarn. Each one of these V shapes is 1 chain. If we have a look on the back of the chain, you can see it looks very different. We've got these bumps. You don't need to worry about those bumps, but you do need to be able to see and identify where those V shapes are. So I've got 10 chains here and now I'm ready to crochet my first row of single crochet. So if we have a look at our chain here, we're going to need to put our hook into the second chain from the hook. So here is the first chain and here is the second chain. Hopefully you can see that okay. So this is the first chain, this is the second chain. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our hook into it between those 2 threads. Just like that. And here it doesn't matter if you go under 1 or 2 threads, as long as you're consistent either going under 1 or if I just put my hook slightly down, here I'm going over 2 threads, and it doesn't really matter, it's down to personal preference. I'm just going to continue going under 2 because that's what I usually do. So to form a single crochet stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop just through that chain. So I'm going to pull it up like that. I've now got 2 loops on my hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Congratulations, you just made your first single crochet, which is kind of the first proper crochet stitch we're learning in this tutorial, so well done. So let's see that stitch again, but in slow motion this time. So put your hook into the next chain, so I'm going in here, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Should now have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to repeat this into every chain until we reach the end of the chain. So put your crochet hook into the next chain. So I'm going in here. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2. Notice how I'm letting the yarn run through my fingers, even though we've got a big tangled mess underneath. I am letting it run neatly through my fingers. So back to those single crochets, put your hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Put your hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Put your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So we just made that final single crochet in the very last chain, and here we've got that twist that we made at the beginning. You might notice here that my crochet has gone all twisted and turned, but that's okay because that's kind of how single crochet is and works. It's quite a dense stitch. So if your crochet looks like mine, you haven't done anything wrong, I promise. This is just how that stitch is. It does not like to lay flat. So let's have a little look at these stitches we've just made here. So if you can see, let me just put my fingers either side just to demonstrate it. So that there is 1 single crochet stitch. You can see we've got 2 threads of yarn here, and we've got 2 threads of yarn at the top forming that V shape, the same V shape as we had in the crocheted chain. So that there is 1 stitch. So we can count our stitches here, and we should have 1 less stitch than we did as a chain. So we started with a chain of 10, and we should have 9 single crochets because we skipped a chain at the beginning of the row. So here you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches. So I'm now going to show you how to work another row of single crochet into the tops of these stitches. And to work crochet in rows, we have to turn it over at the end of every row and work from the back. So this is the front of your single crochets. You can see at the front, we can see those V's at the top of the stitch there. When we flip it over, we can no longer see those V's, and it looks very different from the back. So before we start any row of crochet, because crochet stitches are formed from the top, we need to make something called a starting chain. And the size of the starting chain depends on the stitch that you're making. For a single crochet, it's quite a short stitch, so we only need to do a chain of 1. So we're going to start our second row of single crochet with a chain of 1. So now we're looking at the back of that last row of single crochet. We're going to make 9 single crochets in for this row, That starting chain for single crochet does not count as a stitch. It's different for double crochet, which I'll show you next. So to make your second row of single crochet, you're going to put your hook in the top of each stitch, and you need to put your hook into that space there. It's kind of hard to see. Let me use this needle to point. So I'm going to be putting my hook in just there. And when I put my hook in, if I bring it up, you can see that I've put my hook under both of the legs of that V shape at the top of the stitch. So this V here is that chain we've just made that doesn't count as a stitch, and this is our first single crochet of the row. So I'm going to put my hook in there to make a single crochet, just as we made a single crochet in the first row. So I'm going to put my hook into the top of that stitch, underneath both of those strands of yarn at the top of the stitch. I'm then going to form that single crochet. So yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. So there we've just made a single crochet stitch there into the top of that stitch. We're going to do this into the rest of the row, so there's 8 more stitches in this row, so we're going to make 8 single crochets. So take your crochet hook and put it into the next stitch. The next stitch is just there, so between those sort of bars, those strands there. I'm putting my hook in there, and then if we look at the top of it, I've gone under both of the strands of the V at the top of the stitch, and this is usually where we make every crochet stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and again put your hook into the next stitch here underneath both of the strands at the top of the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and again put your hook into the top of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, put your hook into the top of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. We're now at the very final stitch, and I'll kind of show you what this looks like because it can look a little bit strange depending on your tension. So this is the final stitch here. This loop here is just the chain that we skipped, so the starting chain. So I'm going to put your hook into the top of the stitch there. That's where I've gone underneath. Then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So that was your second row of single crochet. Well done for learning a new crochet stitch. And when you work rows of single crochet, you just repeat that row we've just done. So we chain 1, turn, and then work a single crochet into each stitch across. You can continue working in rows of single crochet and rewind and slow down the tutorial if you want some more practice. But if you're ready to tackle your first crochet project, I have a scarf tutorial that only uses single crochets and chains that's perfect for a beginner's first project. I'll link it up at the top corner here now, but I'll also link it at the end of this tutorial too. We're now ready to move on to learning what I think is the most common crochet stitch, and that is double crochet. So I've just added a couple of extra rows to this little sample of single crochet just so it's a little bit easier for you to see me make the double crochets. So To make the double crochet, we're going to make a starting chain, and unlike with single crochet, our starting chain is going to be 3 chains, and we're actually going to count it as a stitch. This means that when we count our stitches, we actually count that starting chain as 1 double crochet. So I will demonstrate that and show you what that means. To make that starting chain, work 3 chains, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now turn your crochet over. We're looking again at the back of those single crochets. We're going to be crocheting our double crochets straight into the top of them. So because we've got this starting chain here that counts as a stitch, we do not need to make a double crochet into the first stitch, so into this stitch here, because this starting chain is already representing the stitch that should be there. So to make a double crochet, yarn over. So we're doing that before we put the hook in the stitch for this stitch. Now put your hook into the second stitch. So we're not going in here because we've already got that starting chain. We're actually going in just here. So there's the first stitch, there's the second stitch, and I'm going to put my hook again underneath both of the loops at the top of the stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. You should now have 1, 2, 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through 2. Well done, you just made your first double crochet stitch. If you struggled with that, I will show you it again much slower, and maybe even slow it right down into slow motion. So yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, you should now have 3 loops on your crochet hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, so I'm only going under 1, 2, yarn over, pull through 2, 1, 2. So there are 2 double crochet stitches. So that there, between my thumbs, bring it up closer to the camera, that is a double crochet stitch. If I get my needle out. So this stitch forms what's called a post here. So it's quite a long sort of twist of loops of yarn here. And then it does have that V shape at the top of the stitch, just like the chains and the single crochets. So let's continue practicing double crochet. Yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 more loops. That's another double crochet made. And again, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and again, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and again yarn over, put your hook into the last stitch of the row. Sometimes this one can be a little bit tricky to find, so we're going in there, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Congrats, you just did your first row of double crochet. So when we count our stitches for double crochet, we need to remember that we're counting this chain as our stitch count. So we should have 9 stitches total. So this starting chain, we're going to pretend it's 1 double crochet. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 double crochets. So let's do another row of double crochet for practice. So start with a chain of 3, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and that counts as your first double crochet stitch when we're counting our stitches. Turn your crochet over. Now because that counts as our first stitch, we're going to skip the first stitch and put our hook into the second stitch. But if you have a look at the back of the stitches, they look a little bit different to when we were working into the back of single crochet stitches. So I'll show you exactly where I'm putting my hook. So first yarn over, then we're skipping this stitch, and I'm going to put my hook in that space there, just there. And I'm actually going under both of the loops at the top of the stitch, so both of those strands of the V at the top of the stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. You should now have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we're going to continue this across the row, and our last stitch is actually going to be in the top of this starting chain. So make sure you keep watching this video so you can see where I'm putting my hook for that last stitch. So next we're going to make another double crochet. Yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, so I'm going in there. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Got 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and again yarn over, put your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So if we have a look at the top of my crochet, my next stitch is, if I show you from the front it's easier to see, you can see we've got our starting chain here as our next stitch, and we need to be careful not to skip this, or like if we accidentally did a stitch at the other end, our crochet would do that. If we skip that starting chain at the end of the row, our crochet will start looking like a triangle. So to work into the top of that starting chain, I'll show you exactly where I'm going to put my hook. So yarn over, and then you're going to put your hook in there. So I'm going from the back of that starting chain through it, as if I was going through when we did the chain down here, that first row of single crochet, we went through the middle of the chain from the front. This time I've gone through the middle of the chain from the back, and if I show you it, if I turn it over quickly, I can show you. Can you see that my hook is coming out there between those 2 strands of the V and the chain at the top there? we only work one double crochet into that very top chain. We ignore those other chains. So to complete the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Continue repeating the rows of double crochet that we've just done until you feel confident with the stitch. You can rewind and slow down to re-watch that last row of double crochet if you need something to follow along with. I'm now going to show you how to properly finish off your crochet so that those ends don't come loose and our stitches start to unravel. So the next technique I'm going to show you is called fastening off. So to fasten off, we're going to make one chain. So yarn over, pull through. And then I'm going to cut my yarn. So using my scissors, I'm going to estimate about 6 inches and I'm going to snip my yarn. Don't snip shorter than this or you run the risk of not being able to effectively weave in your end and you run the risk of your stitches coming undone. Take your crochet hook and pull. Keep pulling that loop until that tail pops through that chain we've just made. Then grab that tail and give it a pull, and can you see here that's tightened that chain right down and kind of knotted off that end of the crochet. I'm now going to show you what we do with these tails. So I'm going to thread my yarn tail. I'm going to start with the one we've just fastened off, but I am going to show you this one as well, so be sure to watch both. So I'm going to thread that tail onto my needle. Again, I prefer to use sharp needles for this, but if you only have a blunt one, that will do the job. So when we're weaving ends in, I like to work from the back of the stitch of the last row. So here is the last row and this is the front of the stitch, and the back looks different because it's kind of more textured and has more bumps on it. So what we're going to do now is weave this tail in, and I find the easiest way to do this is to thread this tail down the middle of that final stitch. So I'm literally going to go down the middle of the stitch like that. It's a little bit harder if you're using a blunt needle. You might have to scoop loops of stitches up, like, let me get my blunt, because often the blunt needle doesn't want to go straight through there. What you might want to do instead is just grab some of these loops as you go down if you happen to be using a blunt needle. So I'm going to put my needle down that stitch and come out the bottom, just there like that. It doesn't really matter if you're going down the same loops as me, just make sure you're inside of the stitch. And I'm going to pull that tail through, and here I don't want to pull it really tight because if you look it's going to squish that stitch down, so you just want enough tension that sort of your stitch is still stood upright. And then my rule of thumb when I'm weaving my tail in is I'm going to weave it backwards and forwards at the bottoms of the stitches 3 times over the same area, at least an inch for that weaving in. So I'll show you what that looks like. I find that my tails never come undone if I do this. So I'm going to take that needle and I'm going to run it underneath some of these stitches. Can you see how I've kind of gone in the middle of the stitch? You can't see my needle from either side. I've just gone under some there. And I'm going to work under, I think, about 6 stitches here because that's about an inch. I always go for at least an inch as a rule of thumb. So there. And then I'm going to pull this so it's not baggy, but I'm not pulling it like this to bunch up my stitches. I want my stitches to lay flatten as they are because it's quite easy to weave this end in too tight and then your crochet doesn't look the right shape. So I'm then going to, if we have a look at a crochet here, can you see there's a loop here? It doesn't really matter what loop you go under here, but I like to go under that loop there. And then I'm going to weave my tail under these stitches back in the opposite direction. So I'm going back over the same area I just secured my tail, and I'm popping out the other end like that. And And then we're going to do this one more time, and this makes sure that your end is really secure and it is not coming loose, especially in heavy use items like clothes and blankets. They can come loose over time if you don't do this. So again, I pick up a loop to secure this end of the tail like that, and then I'm going to work that needle back under those 6 stitches again, just like that. So now that tail is secure, I can trim it right up to the crochet so you can't see it. You can see there, you can't see that tail from the back or from the front. So we're going to repeat the same thing with this tail, but I find it can get a little fiddly doing it along that starting chain. So I tend to thread the tail in. Oh, I've picked up the wrong needle there, the sharp needle. And what I like to do with this is I'm going to again thread it backwards and forwards along the same few stitches, but I don't like doing that along the chain if I can help it, because I find that it's quite fiddly to do. So instead I'm going to go through that second row of stitches just there, and then just repeat that back and forth 3 times so that that tail is secure. So that is all of the basic skills you need to get started with crochet. I'll pop up a couple of tutorials on the screen now that are great for beginners. If you don't like the look of either of those 2 projects, do check out the rest of the tutorials on my channel. Most of them are beginner friendly, and I have multiple playlists of all sorts of projects, from blankets and granny squares to crochet tips and tricks. Hopefully I'll see you again in another crochet tutorial.